After Arsenal's loss to Chelsea on August 22nd, 2021, further quotes about how the club is unrecognizable to former players began to crop up. In this video, we'll take a look at where the club was under Wenger, how the money has been spent since then, and how there's still hope for the future, so long as changes are made first in the technical roles at the club and then on the pitch. Hey, I'm Adrian, and by the way, I should preface this video by saying that we are, of course, still very early in the season, in this new Premier League season, and a new start is an opportunity to eradicate some of the problems of the past. But when we see the same sort of issues carrying over from the previous season, I think it's okay to acknowledge them. For every negative, I'll try to rationalize or give a concrete reason as to why that has been the outcome for Arteta's Arsenal in order to avoid another ha ha ha, Arsenal is shit type video, which, YouTube already has plenty of those. But again, acknowledging how the DNA of the club is different, is almost gone, according to some players. Acknowledging what the players have said, I don't see anything wrong in that. To take stock of where a club's fortunes sit in the present, it's helpful to look back at where they came from, or in this case, even before then, as Arsene Wenger's arrival from Grampus Nagoya in 1996 revolutionized the club. Hell, it even revolutionized English football. No longer were the players allowed to drink all the time in the dressing room or the players' lounge. Their diets were completely changed to that of a more Japanese-influenced diet. He brought in osteopaths and massage therapists, amongst other techniques that were unheard of at the time. I did an entire video on this, on how Arsene Wenger changed Arsenal and football. English national team players would speak of how the Arsenal boys would show up to camp and would always be in better shape, and Arsenal's fortunes would take a turn. Wenger served for 22 seasons, overtaking the previous record holder, George Allison, who served for 13 seasons. In that time, Wenger won 3 Premier League titles, 7 FA Cups, which makes up 50% of Arsenal's total FA Cup triumphs. He made it to the Champions League final, which had never been done before, as well as making it to the Europa League final. Unfortunately, he lost both of those finals. He also ensured that Arsenal were ever present in the upper echelon of European clubs. Rag on him however you like with his 7 consecutive round of 16 exits in the Champions League, but the fact is that he managed to keep Arsenal in the Champions League for 19 of his 22 full seasons in charge. Something supporters would bite your hand off for at this point. Arsenal were in the Champions League for 19 of 20 seasons from 98-99 to 2016-17. His final season was spent in the Europa League, and since then, they have made it 5 consecutive seasons in Europe's second-tier club competition. By the end of his time with Arsenal, there were absolutely some signs of him losing his touch or overstaying his welcome, however you want to look at it. But prime Arsenal was a sight to behold. Winning trophies or not, all of Arsene Wenger's side had an identity. You could truly pick out their play style with intricate passing and movement and overall great technical ability. But since leaving, that's fallen by the wayside, and former Gunners who played under Wenger don't recognize the team they are watching, let alone the approach. Following the aforementioned loss to Chelsea, Bakary Sagna, who made 284 appearances for Arsenal, and Emmanuel Petit, who made 116 appearances for Arsenal, didn't hold back. First, Petit. Quote, "I don't feel anything watching Arsenal. I've become completely desensitized. I feel nothing. What is the plan? We have spent close to the most in the Premier League this summer. I don't understand it." And Sagna, quote, "When I watch Arsenal now, honestly, I know they are going to lose the majority of the time. That something is going to happen, that we are going to concede a stupid goal. When I was playing, anyone would be excited to join Arsenal. Now, we have lost our DNA. How can you spend 150 million euros and only bring in young players? It might be good for the future, but someone has got to think about the present." He's not wrong. You don't have success in the present, you don't make the Champions League, you don't have more money coming in. But speaking of spending, that's a good place to move on to. A stat from Opta came out following the loss to Chelsea, highlighting Mikel Arteta's record as an Arsenal manager. 20. Mikel Arteta suffered his 20th defeat as Arsenal manager in the Premier League in what was his 60th game, while Arsene Wenger didn't register his 20th defeat with the Gunners in the competition until his 116th game. That's about a loss every 3 matches, basically, for Arteta. But I think if we're going to compare the two, some context is required, such as the team Wenger inherited with the likes of Bergkamp, Ian Wright, a solid defensive line, etc., versus what Arteta has inherited. The quality just isn't there, of course. And I don't mention this as a complete cop-out for Arteta either, but more as an indictment of how poorly run the club has been. That being said, Mikel Arteta, he did well to turn things around in the latter half of last season, improving on Arsenal's defense, while the attack still remained a bit of a problem area for them. So credit where it's due to Mikel Arteta. But as for the money he has spent to try and improve the squad he has inherited, I mean, some will point to David Luiz and Willian's free signings as major gaffes, one of which, Willian, Arteta was behind, only to later be forced to bench him based on his performances. Now it looks like he'll finally be leaving the club. In total, to this day, Arsenal have paid £182 million in transfer fees since Arteta has taken over, bringing in the likes of Ben White, Gabriel, Aaron Ramsdale, Thomas Partey, Martin Odegaard, Lokonga, Nuno Tavares, Pablo Mari. And those are just the paid transfers. You can't say he hasn't been backed. Whether these signings are enough to make a difference on the squad is another question entirely, but Arteta has certainly been backed financially by the Kroenkes. Sums like this are up there with some of the top clubs in the league. It's not as if Arsenal have fallen behind when it comes to spending. And to spend this amount during a pandemic, no less, is quite the luxury. Especially for a club like Arsenal that relies so heavily on match day ticket sales. The recruitment department at Arsenal could be scrutinized, especially when you compare it to one of the teams that has jumped over Arsenal in recent years, Leicester. As of now, they seem to be the kings of smart signings, of recruitment, with their record signing being the £40 million midfielder Yuri Tielemans, and their constant raids on Ligue 1 providing diamond after diamond. And this is what Arsenal used to do. I remember when they almost resembled the French national side. For Arsenal, they've spent around 50 million or more on just one player in each of the last 3 summer transfer windows: Pepe, Thomas Partey, and Ben White. But if you were to stand back and take an honest look at the squad, remove any sort of form, looking strictly at ability, how would Arsenal's starting 11 compare to Leicester's? It makes for an interesting debate. Perhaps the recruitment at Arsenal has been slowly dying for a long time. In fact, it does sort of feel that way, doesn't it? Perhaps the impact David Dein had in this department went even further than previously thought, as even Arsene Wenger's final years at the club were seen as a disappointment, not only on the pitch, but when it comes to recruitment. Plenty will point to the infamous summer in which he spent around £100 million on Xhaka, Mustafi, and Lucas Perez. But again, context is important here. Mustafi was fresh off of winning the World Cup and was generally a respected defender, and Xhaka was a highly touted prospect that, all things considered, is still an important player for Arsenal. Perez, that one didn't work out. So it's safe to say that Arteta has been backed. We've established that. In fact, the managers that have followed Arsene Wenger in general have been backed, as Arsenal have spent almost £400 million since Wenger left. And all of this smells of another club that went through a ridiculous spending spree to attempt to get out of a slump before finally finding a light at the end of the tunnel. Put your hand up if you thought I was going to say Liverpool. I mean, it's unfortunate for said club, not Liverpool, the one we're about to talk about, and their supporters, but whenever a club begins spending ridiculous amounts but continues to flounder, you hear about how they could legitimately become the next AC Milan. A team who was on top of the world and who found themselves qualifying for the Champions League this season, the first time since the 2013-14 season. Now, of course, Arsenal is nowhere near AC Milan when it comes to silverware and their stature on the European stage, but some parallels could, in theory, bring some hope for Arsenal supporters. They're going to have to be patient, of course, just as Milan supporters were, but there are reasons to be optimistic. Before Elliott management came along to right the ship for the club, and in doing so taking Ivan Gazidis away from Arsenal, Milan were a disaster, consistently underperforming, investing ludicrous amounts on players that weren't up to snuff, going through an incredible amount of managers before eventually landing on Stefano Pioli, a guy who was unfancied in Serie A. In the season and a half that Stefano Pioli has been in charge, the club has transformed, whether through smart loans that become permanent, cash signings scouted by the quite clearly competent footballing, keyword footballing brain of Paolo Maldini in a technical role, powered by the funding from over 20 brand partnerships that Gazidis and Elliott management have been able to secure for the club's finances recently, through the patient approach adopted by Stefano Pioli and supported by the senior members blended into the playing squad. Milan are on their way back to being a top 5 mainstay in Serie A. They spent 19 match days in first last season before settling in second. Plenty of credit must go to Pioli, but it's the team in the background, the Gazidises and the Maldinis, that make all the difference for the running of a club. Perhaps Arsenal will get to that level eventually, but it will take a change in the backroom staff, in the technical directors, the recruitment staff, and the like. As Emmanuel Petit, honestly, I never thought I'd have this many quotes from Emmanuel Petit in one video, but as he said back in June, quote, "It's not the question of money, because Arsenal have the power to put 70 million pounds on a player if they want to. It's a question of profile. Who do you want for your team in terms of character and quality? To be honest, I'm not really convinced. For 4, 5, 6 years now, with 60% of the team. This is a turning point for Arsenal. They are at the end of the world. They need to take the right direction or else they'll drop, and drop again, and it'll be more difficult for them to attract players. The resources are there. Arsenal does have the money, but it's the decision making that is bringing them down. It's not going to be a quick fix, and I feel for Arteta, who is basically the stopgap between the rotting Arsenal and the club that has the potential to be something much greater than it currently is. But like another club legend, Thierry Henry has said, quote, "The team hasn't been successful recently, obviously winning cups along the way, but nowhere near the level of trying to compete for the title. But you can say the same for a lot of teams. You see Liverpool wait 30 years to win the title. It takes time, even for great teams." Again, the framework is there for Arsenal, and it's now a question of which route they choose to take to get out of the banter years. Or if they choose to even get out of them, if you will. The money has been spent. Argue over whether it will have been spent wisely. The manager has been backed. And finished article or not, the pressure is on to get the results now. A tough task, so long as those in technical roles don't change, or at least don't change their approach in order to find their DNA again. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then do be sure to subscribe for more from us here at Rabona TV. I'm Adrian. I thank you for spending your valuable time with us, and I hope to see you in another video. Ciao.